My wife live streamed the exact moment I found out my mom died and broke down crying on TikTok with the caption, "When your husband is more dramatic than a teenage girl." When I begged her to stop recording, she screamed, "Shut up. I have 10K viewers right now. I'm going viral." I didn't argue. I didn't fight for the phone. I just walked out while she kept filming my grief for content. What I did next destroyed her entire online presence. And now she's begging me to stop, saying, "Please stop. It was just content." My name's Ethan, I'm 34, and until recently I was married to Brittany, who's 29. We've been together for 6 years, married for 3. I work in IT for a mid-sized company in Denver, nothing fancy but it pays the bills. Brittany worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, but her real passion, and I use that word loosely now, was social media. When we first met, her Instagram had maybe 500 followers. She posted normal stuff, food pics, selfies, the occasional sunset. It was cute, honestly. But somewhere around 2022, she got bit by the influencer bug hard. Started spending hours editing videos, researching hashtags, buying ring lights and tripods. Our spare bedroom turned into what she called her content studio, which was basically just a corner with good lighting and a backdrop she'd change depending on the vibe she was going for. At first, I was supportive. Everyone needs hobbies, right? And she seemed happy doing it. Her follower count started climbing, 1K, then 5K, then 10K. She got her first brand deal with some skincare company, made like $200, and you'd have thought she'd won the lottery. She was so excited, talking about how this was just the beginning, how she was going to be the next big thing. That's when things started getting weird. See, having a moderate following on social media is like getting a taste of a drug. Brittany became obsessed with engagement rates, posting schedules, trending sounds. She'd film TikToks during dinner, interrupting our conversations to catch good lighting. She'd ask me to hold the camera while she pretended to be surprised by things she'd obviously staged. Our entire life started revolving around what would make good content. I'll be real with you, I should have put my foot down earlier. But she was making money, not much but enough to justify the time she spent on it. And when she was happy with a video's performance, she was genuinely happy. I didn't want to be the husband who crushed his wife's dreams, you know? The real turning point came when she started doing reaction content. She'd film herself reacting to movies, TV shows, other people's TikToks. The algorithm loved it, and her following jumped to 50K pretty quickly. But then she started filming reactions to real stuff, phone calls, conversations, moments that should have been private. I remember the first time it really bothered me. We were at her sister's birthday party, and her nephew, he's like 8, fell off his bike and scraped his knee pretty bad. Kids crying, there's blood, the whole family's trying to comfort him. And there's Brittany, phone out, filming the whole thing with some caption about when family gatherings go wrong, #authentic, #real life. I asked her later why she thought that was appropriate, and she gave me this look like I was being ridiculous. It's just content, babe. People love authentic moments. Besides, Caleb's fine. That should have been my wake-up call, but I guess I'm a slow learner. Things escalated over the next year. She'd film arguments we were having, not the whole thing, just her side, making it look like I was being unreasonable about whatever. She'd post videos complaining about my habits, my family, my job. Always framed as relatable wife content with captions like, "When your husband thinks loading the dishwasher means putting dishes near the sink, #marriage life, #husband problems." Her followers ate it up. Comments full of women agreeing, sharing their own husband horror stories. The validation was like crack to her. She started exaggerating things, making mountains out of molehills just for the engagement. I tried talking to her about boundaries. Asked if we could keep some parts of our life private. She'd agree in the moment, then a week later I'd find out she'd posted a video about our conversation, spinning it as "When your husband tries to control your content, #independence, #boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I stayed. Love makes you stupid sometimes, and I kept thinking she'd get tired of it, find a new hobby, go back to being the woman I fell in love with. Plus, her account was actually doing well, she'd hit 75K followers and was making decent money from sponsorships. It felt petty to complain about something that was working for her. I wish I'd known what was coming. My mom, Nancy, lived about 4 hours away in Grand Junction. She was 67, retired, living alone since my dad passed 5 years ago. We talked every Sunday without fail, had for years. She was one of those moms who remembered everything, my work projects, my friends' names, even weird stuff I'd mentioned months earlier. She had early-stage dementia, diagnosed about 2 years ago, but she was managing it well with medication and a good routine. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was working from home, had just finished a meeting, when my phone rang. Unknown number, but with mom's condition, I always answered unknown calls in case it was about her. "Is this Ethan Walker?" "Yeah, that's me. This is Dr. Emily Brooks from St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction. I'm calling about your mother, Nancy Walker. My stomach dropped. You know that feeling when you know something's wrong before they even tell you? That was happening. She was brought in early this morning after a neighbor found her collapsed in her garden. I'm very sorry to tell you this, but she passed away about an hour ago. It appears to have been a massive heart attack. It would have been very quick. I don't remember what I said after that. Something about coming up there, I think. The doctor was professional but kind, gave me information about what happens next, who to call. I was taking notes on autopilot, writing down words that didn't feel real. When I hung up, I just sat there for a minute. The house was quiet, Brittany was at work, wouldn't be home for a couple hours. I should call someone, I thought. My brother in Seattle. My aunt in Phoenix. But I couldn't move. It was like my brain couldn't process what I'd just heard. My mom was gone. Just like that. We'd talked 3 days earlier about her garden, how the tomatoes were coming in early this year. She'd been planning to come visit us next month for my birthday. She'd been making me a sweater, had been working on it for weeks, sending me pictures of her progress. That's when it hit me, and I started crying. Not pretty crying, the ugly, shoulder-shaking kind where you can't catch your breath. I loved my mom so much, and I was never gonna talk to her again. Never gonna hear her voice saying my name, never gonna get another one of her care packages with homemade cookies and newspaper clippings she thought I'd find interesting. I was sitting at my desk, probably crying for about 10 minutes, when I heard Brittany's key in the front door. She was home early, which was unusual, but I was grateful. I needed someone right then. Babe? She called out. You home? Yeah, I managed to say, though my voice was all rough from crying. I'm in the office. I heard her footsteps coming down the hall, and then she appeared in the doorway. She took one look at me, red eyes, tissues everywhere, obvious mess, and instead of asking what was wrong, she pulled out her phone. I kid you not. Her first instinct wasn't to comfort her husband who was clearly devastated. It was to start recording. Oh my gosh, babe, what's wrong? She said, but she was talking to the camera, not to me. I could see the recording light, could see myself in the preview window. She'd already started the live stream. Brittany, I said, trying to wipe my face. Can you please put the phone down? My mom. Guys, something's obviously happened, she said to her audience, ignoring me completely. Ethan's having a total breakdown right now. I just got home and found him like this. I stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Brittany, please. My mom died. That's when she should have stopped. Any normal person would have stopped. But Brittany saw the viewer count climbing, I could see it on her screen, numbers jumping from hundreds to thousands, and her eyes lit up. Oh no, guys. His mom died. She announced to her followers like she was reporting breaking news. The comments started flooding in, those little hearts floating across the screen. This is so sad. Send hearts for Ethan. Please stop recording, I begged her. I was still crying, couldn't help it, and seeing myself on her phone screen was making it worse. Please, I just need. Guys, look how upset he is, she continued, angling the phone to get a better shot of my face. This is like, so raw and authentic. You never know when tragedy's gonna strike. I stood up, thinking maybe if I walked away she'd stop, but she followed me with the camera. The viewer count was climbing, 5K, 6K, 7K. More hearts, more comments. People were eating this up. Brittany, I'm begging you. Turn off the phone. Please. Oh my gosh, he's being so dramatic right now, she said to the camera, rolling her eyes. Like, I get that you're sad, babe, but you're kinda being more dramatic than a teenage girl. That's when something broke inside me. I just learned my mother was dead, and my wife was broadcasting my grief to thousands of strangers while mocking me for having feelings about it. Shut up. She suddenly screamed at me when I tried to reach for her phone. I have 10K viewers right now. I'm going viral. Don't you dare ruin this for me. 10,000 people were watching me have the worst moment of my life, and my wife was treating it like winning the lottery. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This wasn't even someone I recognized. The hearts kept floating across the screen, the viewer count kept climbing, and she kept filming my breakdown like it was entertainment. I could have argued. Could have fought for the phone. Could have made a scene that would have given her even more content. But instead, I did something that apparently surprised everyone, including myself. I walked out. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and my jacket, and I left. She was still filming, still talking to her audience, still treating my mother's death like content as I walked out of our house. I could hear her through the door. Guys, he's being such a baby about this. Like, people die, it's part of life. Anyway, make sure to follow me for more authentic content. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My mom was dead, and my wife had turned it into a show. I felt numb, hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides. I drove to my buddy Jason's house. He works nights, so he was home during the day, and I knew I couldn't be alone right then. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask questions, just pulled me inside and made coffee. "Mom's gone," I told him, and saying it out loud made it real again. I cried some more, and Jason just sat there, being present. No phones, no cameras, no audience. Just a friend being a friend. I told him what happened with Brittany, and I watched his face change from sympathetic to disgusted to angry. "Dude," he said quietly. "That's messed up. Like, really messed up." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I can't go home. Not right now." "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "But Ethan, you gotta know this isn't normal, right? What she did. That's not what people do to people they love." I stayed at Jason's for 3 days. During that time, I learned just how viral Brittany's stream had gone. The video of my breakdown had been clipped and reposted everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, even Reddit. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Most of the comments were exactly what you'd expect. People calling her heartless, disgusting, questioning what kind of person does that to their spouse. But there were others too, people defending her, saying I was being dramatic, that she was just documenting her life. She'd gained 30,000 followers in 3 days. When I finally went home to get some clothes, she was waiting for me. She'd been calling and texting nonstop, but I'd blocked her after the first day. "Baby, you're being ridiculous," she said as soon as I walked in. "It wasn't that bad. And look." She showed me her phone. "I'm almost at 100K followers. We could do brand deals, sponsored posts. This could change everything for us." "Everything for us?" I stared at her. "Brittany, you filmed me finding out my mother died. You called me dramatic while I was grieving. People I don't even know have seen me at my lowest point because you decided to broadcast it. But think about the opportunities," she insisted. "Companies love authentic content. We could make real money from this." That's when I realized she still didn't get it. She thought this was about money, about followers, about opportunities. She couldn't understand that she'd violated something fundamental about our marriage, about basic human decency. "I'm staying at Jason's," I told her. "I need time to think." "Fine," she said, already pulling out her phone. "But you're being super overdramatic about this whole thing." I packed a bag and left again. As I was driving away, I got a notification that she'd gone live. The title was "Husband Abandoned Me After Mom Drama." The truth about what really happened. She was already spinning the story, making herself the victim. That night, lying on Jason's couch, I made a decision. I couldn't control what Brittany had already done, but I could control what happened next. And what happened next was going to be strategic, legal, and absolutely devastating. See, here's what Brittany didn't know about me: I'm really, really good with computers. It's my job, but it's also my hobby. I know about digital footprints, about terms of service, about privacy laws. And I know how to document everything. Over the next week, while she kept posting content about our drama and gaining more followers, I was busy. I saved every video, every post, every comment. I documented dates, times, view counts. I researched privacy laws in Colorado, consulted with 3 different lawyers, and built a case. But I didn't stop there. Remember how I mentioned Brittany had been making money from sponsorships? Well, I'd been keeping track of that too, because taxes. What I discovered was that she hadn't been reporting any of her influencer income. Not a penny of it. 3 years of brand deals, sponsored posts, affiliate commissions, all of it off the books. She owed the IRS about $47,000 in back taxes and penalties. I also discovered that several of her viral videos had been using copyrighted music without permission. Not just the trending sounds that TikTok covers, actual songs from artists who actively pursue copyright violations. There were at least 12 clear violations that I could document. And then there was the big one: the video of my breakdown was filmed in our home office, where I work with confidential client information. In the background of her stream, visible for about 30 seconds, was my computer screen showing client data from my company. She'd inadvertently broadcast protected information belonging to 3 different businesses. This was where I had her. I started with the copyright issues. I researched the artists whose music she'd used and found their management companies. Sent detailed reports with timestamps, view counts, and documentation of commercial use. Most of them filed DMCA takedown notices within days. Then I contacted the IRS. Anonymous tip, completely legal, with documentation of her unreported income going back 3 years. They're very interested in social media tax evasion these days. For the privacy violation, I went to my company's legal department. Showed them exactly what had been broadcast and when. They were not happy. Not only did they file a complaint against Brittany, but they also started their own investigation into whether our home office setup was secure enough for remote work. But the biggest move was personal. I filed for divorce and sued her for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of Colorado's privacy laws. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case, especially with how viral the video had gone. The timing of everything was perfect. Here's what happened over the course of 2 weeks. Day 1, first copyright strike. Her TikTok account got a warning. Day 3, second copyright strike. 24-hour suspension. Day 5, third copyright strike. Her account was permanently banned. Day 7, Instagram followed suit, removing multiple posts for copyright violation. Day 9, IRS audit notice arrived at our house. Day 11, legal papers were served for both the divorce and the lawsuit. Day 14, she got fired from the dental office after they saw the videos and decided she didn't represent their family-friendly image. But wait, it gets better. Remember those brand deals she was so excited about? Turns out, most influencer contracts have morality clauses. When her account started getting banned and the negative press picked up, companies started dropping her left and right. 3 different brands demanded refunds for sponsored posts that were no longer accessible due to the bans. She went from 100K followers and steady income to 0 followers and owing money in less than 2 weeks. The final nail in the coffin came when she tried to start over on different platforms. But here's the thing about the internet, it never forgets. Every time she'd create a new account, people would recognize her as that woman who filmed her husband's breakdown and mass report the account. She couldn't escape her reputation. Meanwhile, I was dealing with my own consequences at work. The privacy violation was serious, and I ended up getting suspended for 2 weeks while they investigated. Thankfully, my manager understood the circumstances and I didn't lose my job, but I had to agree to work exclusively in office for 6 months and take additional privacy training. It was worth it. The divorce proceedings were where everything really came together. My lawyer had documented everything, not just the initial live stream, but all the follow-up content where she'd continued to exploit our private situation for views. We had proof of financial fraud, the unreported income, proof of invasion of privacy, and proof of intentional emotional distress. Brittany's lawyer tried to argue that she was just documenting her life, that social media was her career, that I was trying to destroy her livelihood out of spite. But when we played the video in court, the one where she called me dramatic for crying about my mother's death and screamed about her viewer count, even her lawyer looked uncomfortable. The judge was not sympathetic to her case. I won't go into all the legal details, but let's just say the settlement was very favorable to me. She had to pay damages for the privacy violation, cover my legal fees, and agree to never post about me or our relationship again. She also had to publicly apologize and remove any remaining content that featured me. But honestly, the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching her realize that actions have consequences. About a month after everything was finalized, she showed up at Jason's place while I was there. She looked rough, her hair wasn't done, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. This was the woman who used to spend 2 hours getting ready just to go to the grocery store because she might film content there. "Please," she said when Jason reluctantly let her in. "Please stop. It was just content." "I didn't think." "You didn't think what?" I asked. "You didn't think I was a real person with real feelings? You didn't think that broadcasting someone's private grief was wrong? Or you didn't think you'd get caught not paying taxes?" "I'm losing everything," she said, starting to cry. "I can't get another job because everyone knows who I am. I can't make content because I keep getting banned. I'm broke, Ethan. I'm living with my sister and she hates me. Please, can't you just call off the lawyers? Make this stop?" Looking at her, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not pity. Just nothing. This person who I'd once loved, who I'd built a life with, was a stranger to me now. "You made your choice," I told her. "When you decided my grief was content, when you chose your viewer count over your husband, when you kept filming while I begged you to stop. Those were your choices. These are the consequences." "But I loved you," she said. "No," I replied. "You loved the content I could provide. There's a difference." She left after that, and I haven't seen her since. I heard through mutual friends that she moved back in with her parents in Nebraska and got a job at a call center. No social media presence at all anymore. A few months later, I was scrolling through Reddit and found a post in one of those relationship advice subreddits. The title was something like "My ex-husband destroyed my life over one mistake and I don't know how to move on." The details were vague, but I recognized the story. She was still trying to paint herself as the victim, still trying to get validation from strangers on the internet. Most of the comments were telling her she got what she deserved. It's been 3 months now since everything went down. I'm living in a nice apartment downtown, got a promotion at work. Turns out being the victim of a viral privacy violation actually made my bosses more supportive, not less, and I'm seeing a therapist to work through everything that happened. People ask me if I regret how hard I went after Brittany, if I think I took it too far. The answer is no. She didn't make one mistake, she made a series of choices. She chose to film my breakdown. She chose to keep filming when I begged her to stop. She chose to mock my grief for an audience. She chose to turn my mother's death into content for her career. And then, after all that, she chose to double down and make more content about our drama instead of apologizing or taking responsibility. Every consequence she faced was the direct result of her own actions. I didn't make her evade taxes for 3 years. I didn't make her use copyrighted music. I didn't make her violate my privacy. I just made sure the people who needed to know about those things found out. The hardest part wasn't dealing with Brittany or the legal stuff or even losing my mom. The hardest part was realizing how long I'd been living with someone who saw me as content instead of as a human being. Looking back, I can see the signs, how she'd always have her phone ready when I was upset, how she'd ask me to repeat funny things I'd said so she could film them, how our entire relationship had become performance art for her audience. I think about my mom a lot. She never got to see how this all played out, never got to know that her son finally stood up for himself. But I think she would have been proud. She always told me to treat people with respect but never let anyone walk all over me. Brittany learned that lesson the hard way. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago. I kept the house, most of our assets, and my dignity. She kept her shame and a very expensive lesson about the difference between content and real life. I still miss my mom every day. I wear the sweater she was making for me, her sister finished it and sent it to me. It's a little too big, but it's perfect. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for my phone to call her on Sundays, forgetting for just a moment that she's not there anymore. But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. For the first time in years, I'm living my life instead of performing it. I go on dates now without worrying about whether they'll end up as content. I have conversations without wondering if they're being recorded. I cry when I need to cry, laugh when I want to laugh, and exist without an audience. It's pretty nice, actually. As for Brittany, I hope she learned something from all this. I hope she figured out the difference between authentic connection and authentic content. I hope she realized that real life isn't a performance, and that the people you love aren't props for your personal brand. But mostly, I hope she never puts another person through what she put me through. Because next time, she might not get off so easy. The internet never forgets, but it also never forgives. And sometimes, that's exactly what someone deserves. But that's not where this story actually ends. See, about 6 weeks after our final conversation at Jason's place, things took another turn that I honestly didn't see coming. I was at work, debugging some network issue that had been driving me crazy all morning, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Usually I'd ignore those, but something made me look. Ethan, this is Rachel, Brittany's sister. I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone in her family, but I really need to talk to you. It's important. Rachel and I had always gotten along okay. She was 3 years older than Brittany, worked as a nurse, and had always seemed like the more grounded sister. But we hadn't talked since everything went down, obviously. I stared at the text for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to just delete it and move on. But curiosity got the better of me. What's this about? I texted back. Can we meet for coffee? There are things you need to know about what Brittany did. Things that were worse than what you found out about. That got my attention. I'd thought I'd uncovered everything, the tax evasion, the copyright violations, the privacy breaches. What else could there be? We met that evening at a Starbucks near my office. Rachel looked tired, stressed in a way I'd never seen her before. She ordered a large coffee with extra shots, which told me this conversation was going to be a long one. First, she said, I want you to know that what she did to you is unforgivable. Mom and Dad are mortified. We all are. Nobody in our family supported what she did. I appreciate that, I said, though I wasn't sure where this was going. But Ethan, there's stuff you don't know. Stuff that makes what she did to you even worse. Rachel pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. This is her bank account from 2 months ago. Look at the balance. $127,000. I stared at the number. Where did all that come from? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Rachel said. The sponsorship money you knew about was maybe $30,000 over 3 years. But this? This is different. She showed me more screenshots, Venmo transactions, PayPal payments, bank transfers. All from the weeks following her viral stream of my breakdown. People were sending her money, Ethan. Thousands of people. They felt sorry for her after she spun the story about you abandoning her. She set up a GoFundMe claiming she was broke and homeless because her abusive husband had destroyed her career. My stomach dropped. She called me abusive? Worse than that. Rachel scrolled through more screenshots. She said you'd been controlling her content for months, that you'd threatened her if she didn't stop posting, that you'd isolated her from friends and family. She made it sound like filming your breakdown was some kind of desperate cry for help. I felt sick. Not only had she exploited my grief, but she'd used it to paint me as an abuser while she collected sympathy money from strangers. There's more, Rachel continued. She's been doing this for a while. Remember when she had that viral video about your anniversary dinner? The one where she complained about the restaurant you picked? I remembered. She'd filmed herself crying in the restaurant bathroom, talking about how I'd ruined their special night by choosing a place she didn't like. It got like 2 million views. That wasn't real, Rachel said. She told me later that she'd picked the restaurant herself, but she knew the bad reviews would get engagement. The whole thing was staged. The hits kept coming. Rachel showed me evidence of dozens of fake stories Brittany had posted over the years. The time she claimed I'd forgotten our anniversary, she'd hidden the gift I bought her and filmed herself being disappointed. The video about me not helping with housework, she'd messed up the house herself right before filming. The posts about my family not accepting her, complete fabrication. She's been making money off of fake stories about your marriage for 2 years, Rachel said. Every fight, every disappointment, every relatable wife moment, it was all content to her. I sat there processing this information, feeling like an idiot. How had I not seen it? How had I lived with someone for 3 years without realizing our entire relationship was performance art? Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because she's about to do something that's gonna hurt a lot of people, and I think you're the only one who can stop her. Rachel explained that Brittany had started a new scheme. She'd created anonymous accounts on various platforms and was selling a course on how to monetize your personal drama. For $297, she'd teach people how to stage authentic-looking content, how to manipulate family situations for engagement, and how to profit from controversy. She's literally teaching other people to do what she did to you, Rachel said. And worse, some of her students are targeting their own families, their own kids. There's this one woman who started staging arguments with her teenage daughter for views. Another one who's filming her elderly mother's dementia episodes and calling it authentic caregiving content. My blood was boiling. It was bad enough that Brittany had exploited our relationship, but now she was teaching others to do the same thing to their families? The course is launching next week, Rachel continued. She's already got over 500 people signed up. That's $148,500 if everyone pays. And Ethan. She's using footage from your breakdown as a success story in her promotional materials. That was it. That was the line she'd crossed that I couldn't let slide. Do you have proof of all this? I asked. Rachel nodded and started forwarding me screenshots, recordings, email chains. Everything I needed to document what Brittany was doing. I thanked Rachel and went home to plan my next move. This wasn't about revenge anymore, this was about protecting other families from what Brittany had done to mine. The first thing I did was contact my lawyer. Brittany was directly violating our divorce agreement by using footage of me in commercial materials. She was also potentially violating various consumer protection laws by selling courses based on fraudulent methods. But I had a better idea than just going after her legally. See, Brittany's new course was being hosted on a platform called LearnHub, which has pretty strict terms of service about the type of content they allow. They specifically prohibit courses that teach illegal activities, promote harassment, or exploit vulnerable populations. I spent the weekend documenting everything. Every fake story Rachel had told me about, every manipulative tactic Brittany was teaching, every piece of evidence that her successful content creation was actually based on fraud and emotional manipulation. Then I reached out to some of the families who were being affected by Brittany's students. It wasn't hard to find them. Rachel had screenshots of the private Facebook group where Brittany's students shared their content and bragged about their engagement numbers. One woman, Amanda, had been following Brittany's advice to create drama with her 16-year-old daughter for TikTok views. The daughter, Zoe, was being bullied at school because her mom's videos had gone viral in their small town. Kids were making fun of her for her psycho mom who films everything. Another student, Ryan, had been staging arguments with his wife about money troubles they didn't actually have. His wife had no idea the fights were being filmed and posted. She thought they were having real marriage problems and had started seeing a therapist. The worst one was Linda, who was following Brittany's advice to document her mother's decline from Alzheimer's authentically. She was filming her 78-year-old mother's confused moments, her accidents, her vulnerable states, all for content. The videos were getting millions of views and Linda was making thousands in ad revenue from her mother's suffering. I reached out to each of these families directly and explained what was really happening. Showed them the evidence that their mentor was teaching them to exploit their own families for profit. The reactions were exactly what you'd expect. Amanda was horrified when she realized what she'd been doing to her daughter. Ryan was ashamed that he'd been following advice to fake problems in his marriage. Linda got defensive at first, but when her siblings found out what she was doing, they threatened to take legal action to protect their mother. Within 48 hours, I had statements from 12 different families who'd been harmed by Brittany's course content. People whose relationships had been damaged, whose children had been exploited, whose private moments had been turned into public entertainment. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report and sent it to LearnHub's compliance department, along with evidence that Brittany was using footage of me without permission and violating multiple terms of service. The response was swift. LearnHub not only removed Brittany's course but also banned her from their platform entirely. They also issued refunds to everyone who'd signed up, which meant Brittany lost nearly $150,000 in one day. But I wasn't done. I also sent the documentation to the attorneys general in 3 states where I knew her students were causing harm. Consumer fraud, elder abuse, child exploitation, there were multiple potential violations of state laws. The story got picked up by a journalist named Natalie Kim who'd been investigating the dark side of influencer culture. She'd actually been tracking several cases of family exploitation for content and was interested in Brittany's story as a case study. Natalie's article, The Influence Predator, How One Woman Turned Family Trauma into a Business Model, went viral in a completely different way than Brittany's content ever had. It was shared by legitimate news outlets, parenting blogs, and digital safety advocates. The article didn't just expose Brittany, it started a broader conversation about the ethics of family content, the exploitation of children and vulnerable adults for social media fame, and the need for better regulations on influencer marketing. Brittany's response to all this was predictable. She tried to create new accounts to defend herself, claiming she was being cancelled for teaching women to monetize their creativity. But every account got reported and removed within hours. The internet had turned against her completely. She also tried to sue me for harassment and interference with her business. Her lawyers sent a threatening letter claiming I'd cost her $150,000 and demanding I stop sabotaging her career. My lawyer's response was beautiful, a detailed explanation of how everything I'd done was protected speech, how Brittany had violated our agreement by using my image commercially, and how she might want to focus on the multiple state investigations she was now facing instead of trying to sue the person who'd exposed her fraud. We never heard from her lawyer again. The real victory came about a month later when I got a message from Zoe, the teenager whose mom had been filming their fake fights. Her message was short but it meant everything. Thank you for helping my mom realize what she was doing was wrong. We're in family therapy now and things are getting better. You probably saved our relationship. That's when I knew I'd done the right thing. But the story still wasn't over. About 2 weeks after Natalie's article came out, I got a call from a detective in Nebraska, where Brittany had moved back in with her parents. Mr. Walker? This is Detective Carter with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about Brittany Walker, I believe she's your ex-wife? Yeah, that's right. What's this about? We've had some complaints filed against her, and we're trying to piece together a timeline of her activities. Would you be willing to come in and give a statement about your experiences with her? It turned out that several of the families affected by Brittany's course had filed criminal complaints. The woman who'd been exploiting her mother with Alzheimer's was facing elder abuse charges, and she was claiming she'd been following advice from Brittany's course. The mother whose teenage daughter was being bullied had filed complaints about child exploitation. I flew out to Nebraska and spent a day with Detective Carter, going through everything that had happened. The timeline, the evidence, the pattern of behavior. He was particularly interested in the financial aspects, the unreported income, the GoFundMe fraud, the course money. This is bigger than just your situation, he told me. We're looking at potential wire fraud, consumer fraud, and conspiracy charges. Her course crossed state lines and involved multiple victims. The FBI might get involved. I gave them everything I had and flew home, feeling like I'd finally done everything I could. 3 weeks later, Brittany was arrested. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, consumer fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The local news covered it, and the story got picked up nationally because of Natalie's previous article. Brittany Walker, the woman who'd turned her husband's grief into content, was now facing 15 years in federal prison. Her parents posted bail, but the damage was done. Every news story mentioned the original video of my breakdown, how she'd built a career on exploiting family trauma, and how she'd taught others to do the same. The trial is still pending, but her lawyer has already reached out about a plea deal. Apparently, facing federal charges tends to make people reconsider their life choices. I've been asked to testify, and I will. Not for revenge, that ship sailed long ago. But because what Brittany did affected more than just me. She hurt families, exploited children, taught people to profit from the suffering of their loved ones. Someone needs to speak for all the people whose private moments were turned into public entertainment. All the kids who were bullied because their parents followed Brittany's advice. All the elderly people whose dignity was sacrificed for views and ad revenue. In her original video of my breakdown, Brittany said I was being more dramatic than a teenage girl for crying about my mother's death. Looking back, I think she had it backwards. She was the one being dramatic, turning real life into performance, treating genuine emotion like content, prioritizing her audience over her actual relationships. I was just being human. And sometimes, being human means standing up for other humans when someone tries to profit from their pain. The internet never forgets, but it also has a way of delivering justice when traditional systems fail. Brittany learned that the hard way. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. I've got a great job, a nice apartment, good friends, and I'm dating someone who thinks social media is kind of stupid and has never asked me to hold her phone while she films anything. We went to visit my mom's grave last weekend. I told her about everything that had happened, about how I'd finally stood up for myself and for other people too. The sweater she'd been making me is getting a little worn from regular wear, but I'm not retiring it anytime soon. I think she'd be proud of the man I've become. And I think she'd be glad that her death, as horrible as it was, led to something good, protecting other families from what happened to ours. Brittany's sentencing hearing is next month. I'll be there, not to see her punished, but to make sure the judge understands the full scope of what she did. How many people she hurt, how many families she damaged, how she turned the most vulnerable moments of people's lives into profit opportunities. Justice doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes it's not about revenge or getting even. Sometimes it's about making sure something that hurt you never happens to anyone else. And sometimes, that's enough. Final update, because apparently this story has more chapters than I thought. I wasn't planning to update this again, but something happened last week that I felt like you all needed to hear about. Plus, some of you have been asking what happened to the families that got caught up in Brittany's schemes, so I wanted to give you some closure on that front too. It's been 8 months since Brittany's sentencing, and I thought I was done with this whole situation. I've been living my life, working, dating Lauren, yes, I'm dating someone named Lauren, and she's amazing, and honestly not thinking about my ex-wife much at all. Then last Tuesday, I got a call that changed everything again. Mr. Walker? This is Agent Megan Blake with the FBI's Cybercrime Division. I'm calling about the Brittany Walker case. Do you have a few minutes to talk? My first thought was that maybe there were more charges being filed, or that she was trying to appeal her sentence. But Agent Blake had something completely different in mind. We've been investigating a larger network of what we're calling trauma content farms, she explained. Your ex-wife's operation was actually part of something much bigger. We think she was working with at least 12 other influencers to systematically exploit family situations for profit. Apparently, while I'd been focused on stopping Brittany and helping the families she'd directly harmed, the FBI had been building a much larger case. They'd discovered that Brittany's course wasn't original content. She'd been part of a network of content creators who were sharing strategies, techniques, and even specific scenarios to exploit for maximum engagement. We found encrypted chat logs going back 3 years, Agent Blake continued. Your wife was part of a group that called themselves the True Life Collective. They were literally coordinating fake family dramas across multiple platforms. The scope of it was incredible. This wasn't just Brittany teaching people bad strategies, this was an organized network of influencers who were systematically exploiting their families, their children, their elderly relatives, all while sharing tips on how to make it look authentic. They had spreadsheets tracking which types of family trauma got the most engagement. They had templates for fake arguments. They even had a rotation system where they'd take turns having crises so the group could support each other and cross-promote. The Walker case broke this whole thing open, Agent Blake explained. When we seized her devices during the arrest, we found evidence of the larger network. We've been building cases against the other members for months. She wanted me to testify again, this time for the federal case against the entire network. I agreed immediately. The trial was set for 6 weeks later, and in the meantime, I got to learn just how deep this rabbit hole went. Remember Linda, the woman who was filming her mother's Alzheimer's episodes? Turns out that wasn't even her idea. The network had a whole category they called elder content with specific scripts for how to make dementia episodes look heartwarming versus tragic depending on what kind of engagement you wanted. Amanda, the mom who was staging fights with her teenage daughter? She'd been following a literal playbook called Teen Drama Gold that included ways to trigger your kids into emotional reactions that would look authentic on camera. But the worst discovery was about something called grief farming. The network had identified that content featuring genuine grief and loss got massive engagement, so they developed strategies for maximizing those moments. They had guides on how to film funerals, how to stage surprise emotional moments, and how to extend grief content over multiple posts for maximum profit. They'd literally turned human suffering into a business model. When I learned that Brittany's livestream of my breakdown wasn't just cruel opportunism but part of a calculated strategy she'd learned from this network, I felt sick all over again. My mother's death and my grief had been fed through their profit machine. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on day 4, telling the same story I'd been telling for almost 2 years now, but this time with the context of knowing it was part of something much larger. The defense lawyers tried to argue that their clients were just content creators trying to make a living, that social media was their job, that drawing the line between authentic and staged content was subjective. The prosecution countered with evidence of the systematic exploitation, the financial profits, and the real harm done to families and children. They showed the spreadsheets, the chat logs, the templates for fake scenarios. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for all 13 defendants. Brittany got an additional 2 years added to her sentence for being what the judge called a ringleader and systematically exploiting vulnerable family members. She's now looking at 7 years total. But here's the thing that really got to me. During the trial, I met some of the other families who'd been affected by this network. Not just Brittany's students, but families of the other True Life Collective members. There was Ryan, whose wife had been part of the network and had been staging their marriage problems for 3 years. He had no idea until the FBI investigation. They're divorced now, but he got full custody of their kids after evidence showed she'd been exploiting them for content. There was Deborah, whose daughter-in-law had been filming her grandchildren's tantrums and emotional moments, following network guidelines on toddler content optimization. Deborah hadn't seen her grandkids in 8 months because her son finally realized what his wife was doing. And there was Brian, whose brother had been part of the network and had been staging fake family emergencies for content. Brian had actually taken time off work and driven 400 miles to help with a crisis that turned out to be completely fake, filmed for a video about family loyalty. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to story after story of families torn apart by people who saw their loved ones as content opportunities, I realized something important. This was never really about me and Brittany. This was about a fundamental shift in how some people view human relationships. These weren't just bad spouses or selfish parents, these were people who'd completely lost the ability to distinguish between genuine connection and performative content. They'd turned their entire lives into shows, with their families as unwitting cast members. After the trial, several of us started meeting regularly. Not as a support group exactly, but as people who'd been through something similar and understood each other's experience. We called ourselves Real Voices Initiative, partly as a joke about the True Life Collective, but also because we wanted to focus on rebuilding genuine relationships after they'd been damaged by exploitation. Through these meetings, I learned more about the long-term effects of what we'd all been through. Ryan's kids were in therapy because they developed anxiety about being watched and recorded. Deborah's family was slowly rebuilding trust, but her grandchildren were still afraid to show emotion around adults because they'd learned that crying might mean cameras. Brian had trust issues with everyone in his family now, never knowing which emergencies were real and which might be content opportunities. And me? I was still dealing with the fact that some of the most important moments of my marriage, anniversaries, holidays, even my mother's death, had been treated as content opportunities by someone I'd loved and trusted. But here's what I learned through our group: healing from this kind of violation takes time, but it's possible. You can rebuild your ability to trust people. You can learn to have relationships that exist just for themselves, not for an audience. The key is surrounding yourself with people who understand that real life isn't performance art. About 3 months after the trial ended, I got a letter in the mail. Federal prison envelope, Brittany's handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was different than what I'd expected. Not defensive, not trying to justify what she'd done. Just sad. Ethan, it started, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand if you throw this away without reading it. But I needed to try to explain something, not to make excuses but because I think I finally understand what I became. I've been in therapy here, court mandated, but I actually like my therapist, and we've been talking about how I got so lost. How I stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as content. Even you. Especially you. The therapist says I developed something called audience capture, where you become so focused on entertaining an audience that you stop being able to have genuine relationships. Everything becomes performance. I know this doesn't excuse what I did. I know saying sorry doesn't give you back your privacy or your grief or your mom's memory. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. But I wanted you to know that I remember who I used to be, before all this. I remember actually loving you, not just loving the content you could provide. I remember being a person instead of a brand. I'm trying to find that person again. It's hard when you've been performing for so long that you don't remember what authentic feels like. But I'm trying. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who sees you as a human being instead of content. You deserve that. I'm sorry I forgot how to be human. I'm sorry I tried to make you forget too. Brittany. I read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Lauren, my girlfriend Lauren, not Sister Rachel. I realize this is confusing, but that's life sometimes. She read it quietly, then handed it back. How do you feel about it? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me is glad she finally gets it. Part of me thinks it's too little, too late. And part of me is just tired of thinking about her at all. All of those things can be true, Lauren said. You don't have to forgive her just because she apologized. But you also don't have to stay angry forever. That's the thing about healing, it doesn't follow a script. There's no right way to feel about someone who hurt you, even if they seem genuinely sorry. I decided not to respond to the letter. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd said everything I needed to say. The best thing I could do for both of us was to keep living my life, keep being human, keep building real relationships. But I did keep the letter. Not because I'm planning to forgive her or because I think we'll ever have a relationship again, but because it felt important to acknowledge that people can change, even if the damage they caused can't be undone. The Real Voices Initiative is still meeting monthly. We've actually expanded beyond just the families affected by the True Life Collective. We now include anyone who's been exploited for content by family members, friends, or partners. It's amazing how common this has become. Parents exploiting their children for family content. Spouses filming their partner's private moments for views. Friends staging fake dramas for engagement. We've started doing workshops about digital boundaries, healthy relationships, and recognizing when someone in your life might be treating you as content instead of as a person. The workshops have been so popular that we're actually starting a nonprofit. We're calling it United Humanity Network, a resource for people who've been exploited for content and for families who want to maintain genuine relationships in a social media world. I never thought I'd become an advocate for digital wellness, but here we are. Turns out getting your life destroyed by an influencer gives you some insight into how to prevent it from happening to other people. Lauren often jokes that I'm the only person she knows who turned their toxic marriage into a nonprofit. It's not wrong, though I prefer to think of it as turning my trauma into something useful. My mom would have liked that. She was always big on finding the silver lining, on making something good come out of something bad. In a weird way, this whole experience led me to work that feels meaningful in a way my IT job never did. I still do IT, someone's gotta pay the bills, but the nonprofit work feeds my soul in a way that fixing network problems never could. Last week, we got an email from Zoe, the teenager whose mom had been staging fights with her for content. She's 18 now, starting college in the fall, and she wanted to thank us for the resources we'd provided during her family's healing process. "You probably saved my relationship with my mom," she wrote. "More importantly, you helped her remember how to be my mom instead of a content creator. We're close again, and it feels real this time." That email made me cry, the good kind of crying, not the breakdown being live-streamed kind. It reminded me why all of this mattered. Why fighting back against Brittany and her network was about more than just revenge. It was about protecting the basic human right to have relationships that exist for their own sake, not for an audience. As I'm writing this update, it's been almost 3 years since that terrible Tuesday when my mom died and my wife turned it into content. 3 years since my life got turned upside down and broadcast to millions of strangers. I'm not gonna lie and say I'm grateful for what happened. I'm not grateful that my mom died, or that my marriage ended, or that my private grief became public entertainment. Those things sucked and they always will. But I am grateful for who I became because of how I chose to respond. I'm grateful for the relationships I've built with people who understand what it means to be human instead of content. I'm grateful for the work I'm doing to protect other families from what happened to mine. And I'm grateful that when someone I loved forgot how to see me as human, I didn't forget how to see myself that way. The internet never forgets, but people can choose what they do with the memories. I chose to turn mine into something that helps other people remember their own humanity. That feels like the best revenge of all. Update: a lot of people have been asking about the legal stuff and whether what I did was ethical. I want to be clear, everything I did was completely legal and above board. I didn't hack her accounts, didn't file false reports, didn't do anything underhanded. I simply made sure that the appropriate authorities were aware of her actual violations. The IRS deserved to know about unreported income. The copyright holders deserved to know their music was being used commercially without permission. My company deserved to know their confidential information had been broadcast. And the families being exploited by her course deserved to know they were being manipulated. That's not revenge, that's accountability. Some people are saying I went too far, that I should have just divorced her and moved on. But here's the thing, she didn't just hurt me. She hurt my relationship with my mother's memory, violated my privacy in front of millions of people, and then built a business teaching others to do the same thing to their families. She earned every single consequence that came her way. And to the few people defending her in the comments, if your spouse died and your partner's first instinct was to live stream your breakdown while calling you dramatic, I guarantee you'd feel differently about the situation. If you found out they were teaching others to exploit their families for profit, you'd probably want to stop that too. Life's too short to let people treat you like content. Sometimes you have to remind them that you're human. And sometimes you have to protect other people's humanity too. Final update: Brittany took a plea deal yesterday. 5 years federal prison, 5 years probation, and she has to pay restitution to all the families who were harmed by her course. She's also permanently banned from monetizing any content that features other people without their explicit written consent. Her lawyer tried to get her a lighter sentence by arguing that social media addiction is a real problem and she needs treatment, not prison. The judge wasn't buying it. He said that when someone builds a business on teaching others to exploit their families, that goes beyond addiction into predatory behavior. I testified at her sentencing hearing. Told the judge about my mom, about the live stream, about all the families that were hurt by her course. When I finished, Brittany's parents were crying. She was too, but I don't think they were tears of remorse. I think they were tears of self-pity. The judge's final words to her were, "Ms. Walker, you took the most sacred moments of human experience, grief, love, family bonds, and turned them into commodities. You taught others to do the same. This court finds that level of exploitation particularly heinous because it attacks the very foundation of what makes us human. She'll be eligible for parole in 3 years with good behavior. I hope she uses that time to figure out the difference between connection and content. As for me, I'm finally ready to close this chapter. My mom would have wanted me to move forward, not stay stuck in the past. But I also think she'd have wanted me to stand up for what's right, which is what I did. The internet never forgets, but people can change. I hope Brittany does. But if she doesn't, at least she won't be able to hurt anyone else for a while. Thanks to everyone who supported me through this. Your comments and messages meant more than you know. And remember, you're not content. You're human. Don't let anyone treat you otherwise.